Hello there, my Gumminites, and welcome back to the Echo Chamber. Okay, so we're going to be getting into another one of these, finally, dealing back with the beginning of the year shenanigans. And I mean, for some of you, it may not be the beginning of the year where you're seeing this video, but it will be necessarily the beginning of the year for me. And by the time I got this video, hopefully I can get it out within an amicable time frame to be, adjusted to the idea of still being within the beginning of the year. But so we do finally got another one of these. The workshop titles are officially back. In this case, we are going to be focusing on one John Doyle. Now, this is actually going to be a long one because this video is a mental gymnastics test and absolutely losing your mind to the idea that there is a guy out there who legitimately decides to do something as cringy and as crazy and as nonsensical as this video as John Doyle does. Now, keep in mind, you guys normally know that I do these videos a lot of times on people that I like, on content that I've seen, when in regards to a lot of the YouTube videos and things that I watch, but I will tend to put a focus on other people outside of that frame of reference. But for the most part, I would say I definitely stick to a lot of times the people that I personally watch and things of that nature, because let's be honest here, when you go on YouTube and a lot of people that you tend to watch, it tends to be people you've already subscribed to and have at least had a good understanding of their content to kind of be repetitive. Let's be honest, most people don't tend to watch a lot of random stuff that shows up on YouTube unless it's like in a For You page or like a recommended, or hell, even YouTube doing the YouTube shorts, which is usually just reposting of TikToks. And so sometimes you'll watch those too, and I guess if your YouTube person decides to do a YouTube short, you'll watch that too. But for the most part, pretty much everyone falls into that banner, and I'm kind of no different, but I will branch out every now and again. And as far as John Doyle concerns, I used to watch his content a lot more in the past. I would definitely say that, so I have a bit of understanding with him, but at the same time, I haven't really watched it in quite a long time. So this is actually his first video I'm kind of getting back into with him, and so, yeah, it's quite the disappointment. Let's go on and get into it, actually.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
How much time we spend with each of the characters, which perspectives we see them from, what we see them doing, what we don't see them doing. All of these things affect our perception of the story, who we sympathize with, who we're rooting for, etc. And Beauty and the Beast utilizes this quite well in order to push a radically feminist and destructive agenda that attacks masculinity, it attacks order, civilized society, strength, among many other things. There really just are so many important themes in this film that we have to discuss.
And now, as far as addressing the first initialized point, which I guess is an initialized point, I will say that he's just wrong. Okay, I don't think I say much more on that. I'll go more in depth later on, you guys, because I look, in terms of this video, it's like I got to a portion in which I think I've seen a good chunk of the beginning of it, but at the same time I haven't really pushed past that point. So as far as me going forward here, is going to be a lot of stuff retained from memory, because I knew I immediately had to make a video and I like pretty much stopped towards the beginning. But at the same time, there's going to be new information that does keep come up. We're going to be debunking it as we go. Like, this is like reaction slash debunk. It's kind of like those two things just really mixing together. But yeah, to address, like, I guess it's like a first pseudo point, not really a pseudo point. It's kind of like him just setting up his premise, and it's just wrong. It's kind of a dumb premise, and that's basically it. All I can really say on that. Well, kind of push more forward and getting into depth a little bit later on.
I was with a young lady.
I was with a young lady.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap right now. Stop the cap.
And she wanted to watch a Disney movie. And so I'm like, all right, we'll pick one. We can watch it. So she's scrolling and she's like, well, how about Beauty and the Beast? And, I had seen this a couple times back in my youth. And so I liked it well enough. And so I was like, yeah, that's fine. So we're watching it. And then about 5 minutes into the film, the purported villain of the film appears on screen, Gaston. And keep in mind, I'm like tired. I'm falling asleep. I don't really even want to be watching this movie, so, But Gaston comes on screen and he immediately takes Belle's book from her and tells her that women shouldn't be reading books because then they might get ideas in their head. That woke me. I was like, for the rest of the movie, on the edge of my seat, just in awe, watching how based Gaston is and how implicitly right-wing this whole story is.
Also, like, kind of like to address another. Now, this is not really necessarily an argument, in my opinion. At least I don't think it's an argument, but it's just something that he's kind of like saying a lot. I think like a little bit more in jest, but he is simply expressing. And I actually do kind of like want to address this. Whereas I do necessarily think that Gaston in some areas in the movie is indeed based. It's not in this moment, because he says that women shouldn't, read or whatever. I think that given the given the context and the historical context and essentially where we were, it's probably practical for everyone to learn how to read or anything like that. I don't think that really makes him base because, you know, especially with the idea that, oh, because women don't get ideas and they start thinking about things. I'm not even going to even use the sexist word. That's just retarded. He's actually kind of illiterate and physically retarded in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to his quote-unquote motivations and plans and, you know, how to actually get that. In fact, you know, if you actually wanted to express into the movie about men's thinking, he actually points out that the idea of thinking in general is a baseless, stupid idea in order to be able to do, especially when he expresses it so wafu. So I don't think that necessarily that makes him based. You know, I think that this is not something, a hill you want to die on, but like I say, he's probably making this point more so in jest and it's not an actually way to characterize his argument, because I don't think it's a part of his argument. Maybe it is, but like I said, I only got about 10 minutes into this video and he doesn't really express this as a big point in his argument, although he does try to quote-unquote simp for Gaston in a way of trying to prove that he's not a villain, despite the literal villainous actions that he has committed throughout the entirety of the film, or at least the latter part of the film, because in the first part of the film, I will defend Gaston necessarily, although I won't defend his beta and simp-like behavior, because, you know, him and Beast both exude that beta energy when it comes to the involvement around Belle, and they do this in several manners and ways, but I don't know if he's going to be addressing all of this. So far, he's just simply talking about that Gaston is the quote-unquote true hero necessarily, and, you know, if you actually look at least the thumbnail of the video, it seems that is the overall expression that Gaston is the real hero, and that this film is quote-unquote right-wing and whatever, but I don't really think a political message really came into it, but at the same time, we're going to see how he expresses that.
And it's important to remember that what we talked about in the beginning, how even with stories, our perceptions of them are often forced in order to manipulate certain outcomes that might influence our future perceptions or decisions. So anyone who watches this film will easily identify Gaston as the antagonist. And this is done intentionally because the messaging of this film is actually deeply progressive. And that's the part I'm not joking about. Like, I'm going to overanalyze it for sport, but that part is actually true.
Okay, so he says that the messaging of the film is deeply progressive because anybody who watches it would obviously identify Gaston as the antagonist. And no, the reason why we identify Gaston as the antagonist is because of the literal crimes he commits. Now, I've seen John Doyle's content before, and he's one of those quote-unquote law and order guys, right? And look, no, nothing against the police here, nothing against the quote-unquote law and order and respecting the laws and all that, okay? You know, I'm pretty much on the side of that for the most part, okay? I'm not going to defend everything, and, you know, sometimes I think certain laws are stupid, but the idea of law and order is an idea which should be represented in a very neutral way, I would like to say, but also as in an inherent good, if that makes any sense to you guys. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not here to get in my quote-unquote political philosophy and all that.
And this is most obvious with the dynamic between Belle and Gaston, but also just in the fact that the audience is made to believe that Gaston is the villain of the story.
No, we identify Gaston as the antagonist because of the villainous actions in which he commits in this film. Like, this is just blatantly obvious. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And you can try to sit there and try to infuse your own beliefs into what you think the directors were going for, you know, trying to sit there and tell them what they were trying to create, even though there was clearly not what you said. But, you know, I'm just saying, man, if you actually watch the film, I don't know if he's actually watched the film. I don't know if he was too busy, you know, jerking it off to Gaston, you know, trying to suck him off or whatever, you know, trying to get all of his quote unquote notes down to express his ideas of how much he loves and sins for Gaston because he's the real hero and blah, blah, blah. He was just actually ignoring all of the terrible shit he does, which clearly points him in line with being the villain, especially given the fact that you are a law and order guy. And you should know that very well he does indeed break the law several times. Nonetheless, if you want to put it in the context of the film, it's clearly still bad. However, I guess, you know, with shady people and with other things, you may not actually care, but whatever. Let's move on.
And this is because this story is basically about this like miserable proto-feminist seeking to invert virtually every aspect of her reality. And because Gaston represents the natural and ideal state of man, and because they can't change that since we all recognize instinctively that it's true, they have to instead frame it such that our perception of it is different.
Okay, so it'd be basically me being repetitive, and I necessarily didn't want to start addressing this point again, but to essentially go over it again, no. You know, this is one of those things where, you know, even if you do agree with anti-SJWs, things of that nature, in which for the most part I tend to agree, because I agree with a lot of the quote unquote philosophy, and I'm very much, I guess, would be considered an anti-SJW, and very much around tradition. I very much talk about gender roles and things of that nature. You guys have never really heard me talk about it, but you've heard in some videos where I go into lead into it and address things like the way women date in modern society and how women are in modern society, and about my absolute hatred of feminism and things of that nature. You guys have probably heard me in some small regards, but basically yes. And about tradition, I actually may even go further than John, and that's really the problem when it comes to tradition. Okay, when I'm talking about the state of man and woman and their natural habitat and things of that nature. But nonetheless, when speaking about here, it's just one of those where I'm like, okay, you're taking it too far, bro. I mean, Belle being a feminist, maybe in some context. Like I said, if you put this under the lens of a microscope and you look at every single solitary action that she does, I wouldn't actually go that far to say that she's quote unquote this proto-feminist, like a super feminist meant to change the narrative of the story to make masculinity look weak or anything like that, because that simply doesn't happen. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. I think, once he clarifies what he's meaning on this point. So far, I don't want to feel like I'm being repetitive to say that, no, dude, once again, Gaston is seen as the antagonist or the villain because he literally does villainous shit. Again, if you want to talk about people looking at him from the beginning, then I would actually be in agreement with you if you say that not necessarily that he's the hero, but that he's just a normal guy in that sense, and he does exude a lot of masculine qualities, but it's more so less the way he exudes them. But again, that's neither here nor there, because to me, it's kind of irrelevant, and I'm not really hating on Gaston for doing that. I don't actually think he's wrong. I don't think he becomes a villain to where he actually starts doing villainous things. Okay, is he a douche? Sure, I guess, whatever. If that's what you tend to believe. I mean, I'm not saying like going that far, but some people do believe that. Fine, whatever. That's fine. Again, he's looked at as a villain because of what he actually does within the film, and he does do villainous, evil shit in the film. It's just an objective fact.
When you view this story objectively, it becomes very clear that the true antagonist of the film is actually Belle, who's manifested some form of pathological narcissistic personality disorder, plain and simple. And the Beast actually serves as this supplementary character, the sort of tragic anti-hero to highlight one half of Belle's nature, which is the beast of her chaotic feminine nature when left unchecked. And so the true protagonist of the story is actually Gaston, who represents the beauty that Belle could experience if she were subject to the natural order of things under Gaston's authority.
Okay, so let me go ahead and actually tell you why that's utter bullshit. Gaston doesn't want the natural, because John is actually a Christian, everyone. He's actually a Christian, so he has a lot of that Christian energy going. I understand, if you actually read the context of the Bible, that a lot of the cherry picking, quote unquote, the cherry picking, the one that you may get your fedora tip or, sit there cherry picking, doesn't actually understand the context. And that's fine. That's whatever. That's neither here nor there. But this is a lot of the basis in which he goes off for his traditionalism. So when he's over here talking about Gaston, he needs to basically understand that that's not going to work, because that's not what Gaston's asking. He's not asking for the submission of Belle. He is asking for Belle to be his slave. There would be one thing for submission, and to kind of like address this context, when you actually look at the film, you actually look at it objectively, and you guys got to really look at the songs. I know some people may not like musicals, but this is definitely a musical film, and it does express a lot of its ideas and stuff within the songs and stuff it writes. Belle is not going against masculinity. She's not this quote unquote narcissist. Look, I'm not going to sit here and try to be a quote unquote Captain Save-A-Ho and not say that Belle doesn't have flaws in her character, because she does. Belle is stuck up. She's very quote unquote in the idea of wanting, and she's very snobby, right? She's very snooty in the idea of wanting that quote unquote privilege that comes with living of higher society. And that's essentially looking at the poor man and saying, F you, because, your life sucks and I want more than quote unquote this. This is not quote unquote pushing towards the idea of a feminist message, nor towards the idea that, Belle's just some rampant narcissistic airhead who just doesn't actually, give a shit. She's clearly understanding the idea of, what she wants. However, she hasn't really been out anywhere in the world. And as far as like the literature in which she reads, it's more so painting a picture of a fantasy, which it comes across the idea that she acknowledges isn't necessarily real, isn't really real life. okay, isn't something that is meant to be taken all too seriously. But however, it does express the nature of adventure in which she wants to pursue. She's not going against quote unquote masculine energy, and this isn't her feminist chaos. I mean, not feminist chaos. Feminine chaos. That's represented by the beast or whatever. That's just absolute nonsense. I mean, this is where you just start interjecting into yourself in here, and Gaston is not the true antagonist who wants to save Belle. No, he wants to make her a slave. Okay, so if you're okay with that, and I know, context of the Bible here, let's actually do a bit of cherry picking. Again, context, but let's actually do a bit of cherry picking. And the same time, and one of my favorite verses, it says, "Children, obey your parents, for this is right." But in the second line, right, pretty much the second verse, same as the first, "Slaves, obey your masters." And if that's the level of submission that you want to go with, and that's why he's okay with this, considering slavery as submission, then that is simply a wrong idea. That is simply a stupid and wrong idea, that slavery should not be considered the form of submission in which you want to go with here. That in submission towards a man or woman is to recognize, understand, accept, and be in place by the man's authorities. Recognize him as the man in the household. This is not what Gaston is wanting to achieve. He wants to essentially make Belle another one of his rampant conquests of his, his concubine. But pretty much because he cannot have her, he turns into a beta, he turns into a simp, and he starts using the quote-unquote masculinity instead of actually focus on his actual self and being a Sigma, being a Chad, and actually taking the rejection and being like, okay, I'm just out of here, whatever. He actually begins to simp. He actually builds upon the idea of being a beta and trying his best to do everything around Belle's vagina. So like I said, he exudes that beta energy when at first he doesn't. He actually has achieved his own acumen. He works on himself and he builds up his own thing. And in fact, when it comes to the context of, other women, he doesn't treat them like they're the prize, right? Because, no offense to a lot of the girls up in there who are going to come against me and say you're a sexist or whatever. Sorry, you guys are not the prize. You are not the prize. And that's always comes back to the conversation of what do women, bring to the table usually, especially when it comes to modern women. It's like, what do you bring to the table? And oftentimes it's nothing, or at least it's nothing of substance or value. It's always these abstractions and these emotional feelings. But this is not what Gaston, is really wanting. He's not wanting submissive. He's wanting a slave. This is made very obvious. He's wanting someone at his beck and call where he has to just do simply nothing, right? He has to do nothing to provide other than, expressing the idea that he would go out and hunt. So, fortune comes and correct me and say that, oh, but he said he's going to hunt, and get the kill and roast it, blah, blah, blah. No, but I mean nothing of substance towards any type of commitment within the relationship. It's just he's going to come, bang her, leave, and do whatever else. Right? That he has no expression to actually want to be in a relationship with her in the true confines of a relationship and an actual partnership among men and women, and understanding the roles in which they take within the home. He doesn't want that. He wants someone to just be a bed warmer, which is of no consequence to the girls who want to do that already, but it is of consequence to Belle because clearly she's not really wanting to do that. So I disagree with this point of this argument here, John. It's absolute nonsense.
This film, broadly speaking, is feminist propaganda, which we will get into momentarily, along with so much more. But even this is subtly acknowledged during the film's best sequence, the most famous sequence in the film, which is the ballroom dancing sequence with the film's main theme playing in the background. And it sings of a tale as old as time, Beauty and the Beast. And we hear this and we think, oh, it must be the Beauty and the Beast that we can see on the screen, but it's not. The film is inviting us to read between the lines. Mrs. Potts is warning us. Think about it. A tale as old as time. This is in reference to the beginning of male-female relationships, along with time itself, which of course would bring us back to Genesis and the Garden of Eden. And what do we learn from that story? That the woman's nature, if left unchecked by strong male authority, will lead towards chaos and evil. She is predisposed towards this at an accelerated rate relative to men.
Now, whereas I'm not going to necessarily disagree with the whole Adam and Eve thing he brought up, again, bringing it up. I mean, look, to be fair, he did say he was going to overanalyze, okay? He was going to kind of like just pull nonsense out of his ass. But as far as like the context of the actual film, again, he's wrong. No, when they're saying a tale as old as time, they're essentially expressing not the quote unquote, I mean, necessarily, I guess I could see the point of, the beginning of male and female relationships, but no, it's expressing the idea that the nature between relationships relationships in terms of male and female are at a certain dynamic. You have the beauty, which in this case is the woman. It's just indeed a love story, right? Where you have the beauty, which is, just, the girl, right? She's the object of the male's affection. And you have the beast, where he may be, a bit like this. He may be a bit like, and I'm not saying I agree with Mrs. Potts' messaging or interpretation when she's quote unquote, pushing that with the song. But that a male is basically like this, he's kind of like maybe like this rough around the edges guy, but or like this bad boy or whatever. And, then they come together and then they understand each other's dynamics and they both change within the relationship to formulate the partnership that would become their marriage or would become their livelihood. That they both end up acknowledging and understanding between each other and how they're going to choose to proceed into a relationship. That's essentially what she's talking about there, and tells all the time that boy meets girl and, or girl meets boy, and then they come together after recognizing that they're not so different, okay, that they have things in common, but they're also opposite enough to where they attract to each other. That's essentially what she's expressing there. They don't go in this deep layered thing where they're trying to critique quote unquote relationships since the beginning of time, or trying to quote unquote bring in Adam and Eve to exude unknown, previously hidden thing about relationships and the dynamic of men and women and blah, 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 blah. They're not doing that at all. It's basically just saying that there's a boy, there's a girl, they may not get along at first, but eventually they come together and come to an understanding with each other. And they both change throughout the relationship in order to be united together as one, now in the confines of marriage. And that is indeed a tale as old as time. Since the beginning of time, the dynamics between men and women, have usually tend to be that way. And yes, again, like I say, he's a Christian, so he's going to go with the perspective of Adam, but, if you don't want to go from that perspective, of Adam and Eve, then it's basically still the same thing, where men have always had a set bound roles and how they approach relationships and what that was intended to be for humanity, and how women, were in the relationship and what that was supposed to be for humanity, and that how they've come together and they formulated this cohesion that has let society progress and run the way, that it has. Whether you believe it's good or bad is completely irrelevant. This is just it. It's essentially what she's saying is this is a classic love story. It's a tale as old as time that people find each other and they fall in love despite having many differences. That's basically all she's saying there.
And Gaston understands this. He was a hero and a great man who was trying to do right by his people, and yet the narrative frames him as though he is the villain.
Oh, fuck off.
He tried to save Belle in his town. That he was trying to do right by his people. Yes, I guess the brutal torture and the essential murder of Belle's father, or, killing the innocent occupants of the castle who have actually done nothing to him. Yeah, the brutal murder and genocide, breaking and entering, stealing of property. Yeah, I guess he was just trying to save them, while trying to murder people, trying to murder innocent people who have actually done nothing to him, who've actually done nothing wrong. And, the town wasn't even affected by their interactions because the spell that was put over the castle essentially made it hidden otherwise, to where nobody could even find it in the first place. And it's like virtually no one even knew about it. So it's just kind of ridiculous to say that. But again, I guess he's somewhat going to try to explain why that is the case, even though if you actually watch the film objectively, that is simply not the case.
And if you're trying to recall the story, you might think it's basically about Belle and the Beast, and then this Gaston guy keeps butting in, but it's actually more intricate than that. Because when we first meet Belle, she's lost. And this is because she has no male influence in her life to guide her. Her father's weak, he's old, which is why that relationship is established before the interactions with Gaston and the Beast even become larger parts of the story. Because from the beginning, the whole story is about Belle desperately needing masculine guidance.
The whole story is about Belle desperately needing masculine guidance. Okay. I guess he's going to elaborate on that point, but to kind of like address the quote-unquote build-ups. No. Yes, her father is old, but as far as, weak, and I don't know what he's determining as a weakness here. Is he talking about weak in terms of his masculine personality, or is he talking about weakness as in, physically? Because I could agree more so with an argument based around the idea of physically that he is weak, and that's mainly because he's old, even though I wouldn't go that far because, he is still able to, kind of like do a lot in terms, especially when you look at some of his inventions and stuff, which would be a lot more heavy set, things that he would have to do physically. I'm saying it would be more work physically than obviously what John would be suggesting he lacks, if that is indeed what he's going with. Like I said, I don't really know if he's talking about, personally, or he's talking about like physically. physically.
And Gaston and the Beast are basically competing to occupy that influence in her life, but for very different reasons, as we'll explain. But
Disagree with the whole idea that she doesn't have that male influence, she doesn't have that male role. You know, actually her dad does quite a lot, you know, for her and influencing her in a not really wrong direction, or that she's lacking guidance, because again, she's not like, and this is actually proven within the first song, right? Within the first song of Belle, I think that is actually the title of the song, where she's not like the rest of the Scarlet whores out there who didn't have their, you know, who don't have a good relationship with their father. You know, the quote unquote classic, oh, well, when you see a whore, right, you see a girl who's more slutty and stuff like that, clearly she lacks a good relationship with her father, like you see the other girls within the town, especially when they're all over Gaston. Clearly those are the, you know, whores, right? Clearly those are the sluts of the town, because they don't have a good relationship with their father. They don't have that masculine presence. But you don't see Belle doing that. Okay, you see Belle actually very reserved and conservative in that way, that she is very appropriate to the idea that she's not going to go out there and just quote unquote be around and wanting to fuck all the time and, you know, do things that would quote unquote, you know, upset her dad if she had one, because, you know, she doesn't have that influence, and therefore, you know, she doesn't have dad's discipline and authority, you know, putting the foot down and guiding her in the right direction. She actually does, and this is just objectively within the film, because this is kind of like shown to us and about the idea of the differences between the women inside of, you know, the town, right? The whores, right? Especially specifically like the three blonde chicks who are all over Gaston. You know, this is basically showing to us the difference between them and Belle, right? And I think they even talk about it, you know, like what makes her special, stuff like that, because I would argue that they're much more prettier than Belle, obviously. I mean, there's more of them to come than it is with Belle, you know, so you get more chicks who are equally as hot, if not hotter. Okay, so it's like, well, what does she have that they don't? Okay, mainly she has a hymen that's intact. Okay, no hymen, no diamond, ladies. But nonetheless, let's keep going.
this is indicated by the title. Beauty and the Beast are both within Belle, and the struggle in the story is between the two competing forces, which will decide which one will embody her essence. Will it be a strong, capable, charismatic, and therefore beautiful man to bring out her beauty, or will it be an insecure, pathetic, hideous beast, like literal creature, that will fail to control her, which will leave her miserable? Because as we're reminded throughout the whole story, Belle doesn't know what she wants. She has no idea. She doesn't know what's going to make her happy. So naturally, when she makes decisions, they basically like blow up in her face. But yeah, that's the story.
Okay, so we have a disagreement with that. Now, I'm not going to sit there and go on his opinion that, quote unquote, Beast is weak, because I've already expressed this. I already expressed why that's objectively wrong. And again, if you actually look at the song, I know, but I've already explained why looking at the songs and the musics in here is going to be very beneficial to you. You actually look at the song, quote unquote, something there that wasn't there before. You can obviously see objectively why he is wrong on this one, because both Beast and Gaston exude the same type of male energy. Belle is attracted. They're not defeating this. They're not saying that this male energy is bad. In fact, they're basically expressing that Belle is attracted to it. The problem was Belle did not see it in a different light when it came to Gaston, because Gaston did not exude it in a different light. And by the time we get to the purpose of where he could be trying to exude it in a different light, he essentially becomes a beta and a simp, right? He loses those masculine traits and goes all around the world to make himself very unobtainably unattractive to Belle. But Beast, on the other hand, right, because you get to see it through a different light, you get to see those same actions. Again, take it from the lines when Belle expresses about Gaston. What does she say? That he's, quote unquote, boorish, he's rude, he's conceited. What does she say about the Beast? Listen to the song again. Mean, unkind, and unrefined. Now, I am paraphrasing a little bit, but if you actually go back and watch the scene, you'll see. In other words, she's talking about the qualities in which they exude as men. And if you actually look at these energies and stuff that they exude, you can understand that there's a lot of the same context and energies about the way that they want versus Belle's indecision or her indecisiveness that would be necessarily presented, and about how they present their authority and things of that nature, and about how they both exude the same type of aggression and stuff like that. However, Gaston isn't actually presented these energies within a very positive light. Okay, and I'm not one of those people who say things like toxic masculinity just because it doesn't. There's nothing toxic about you being a man. There's nothing inherently toxic about your manhood, your manliness, or anything like that. Toxic masculinity is not a thing. However, when it comes to quote unquote toxic ways, the ways that he quote unquote presents or expresses the energies, Beast is shown in a better light, and essentially because of what he does with those energies and showing that natural. I mean, that's why I don't know where he gets the whole weakness from and stuff like that, especially when he shows what a lot of the baseline qualities are for that, especially when it comes to being a protector, right? Going out of your way to showcase and express your way through love and things of that nature that you would have, because, you know, women and men love differently, or express, you know, the feelings that they have towards one another differently, or, you know, showcasing that they care. You know, Beast shows that quote unquote protector dynamic, right? Where he goes out of his way in order to be able to save Belle, but he does critique and criticize her for her rampant stupidity, right? And expressing in that way. This is just blatantly where he's wrong. They both pretty much exude the same type of energy when it comes to that masculine. It shows that Belle's attractive. She's not trying to change that, right? This whole idea that, oh, Belle's just trying to change them. He's trying to change the Beast. No, the only ones who even remotely do anything for the Beast in regards around him changing any aspects of his personality are his wingmen, who are trying to get him laid. Mainly because they have their own agenda in the sense that they want to be human again. So they're kind of like trying to point out how is the best way to get laid. And considering, you know, you have people like Lumiere and stuff like that who have already proven, you know, to constantly be getting play, you know, I'm sorry, that's just is a thing in this movie where they clearly showcase him to be constantly getting play, that this is probably a reason that they think that, okay, well, you know, here's some things that you could probably do in order to be able to impress the girl, you know, maybe get to her. There are baseline instincts that he does, like going out there to protect her and stuff like that, but there are other things that he does in order to be able to express why, you know, he's the better option in this quote-unquote competition between them. And so, like I said, if you just watch the film, if you just blatantly watch the film, these things are obvious, right? And you can see it. So again, he's just wrong on that, but again, he's got more points, so we're going to keep going through them.
So it starts out by describing how exactly the Beast came to be. And basically what happened was this poor, ugly old woman came to his castle asking for shelter from a storm. And she told him that she could offer him a rose. And the Beast, who at the time was a prince, said no, because she was ugly and poor. And at first you might think that this is based because she had poor physiognomy, but it wasn't. It was actually proto-Coomerism, because then the woman transforms back into her natural form as a beautiful princess. And the prince immediately starts simping for her. So it wasn't a rejection of her because he inferred from her poor physiognomy that she would have poor character, but rather that he couldn't just like lust after her. And then when he realized that she was actually a beautiful princess, he began simping.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
Okay, no, again, he didn't watch the movie, and he actually has the scene up here right now. I want you to actually look at the context of the scene here, guys, because you can see it through my video. But if you actually look at it, just open your eyes a little bit and tell me what you see when you actually look at this mural real quick. Do you see Coomerism, or do you see a magical super demigoddess who is literally lighting her hair on fire with her magical wand and literally sprouting up out of a plant? Now you tell me, do you think that the prince is simping because he can't lust after her, or, as the movie and the narrator explains, because when she transformed into the beautiful quote-unquote goddess, she then threatened him with a magical spell, and he saw the intent of her power and what she can do over him, and that's why he started getting on his knees and begging. So, are you going to either follow John Doyle, okay, and not believe your quote-unquote lying eyes, or are you going to actually look at the movie? Because as you can see right here, even in just a screenshot, because I can't show you in the movie because obviously you'll get copyrighted to death, I can't show you any bit of the movie. Okay, so it's not Coomerism, it's not him suddenly simping and being a beta, it's him like, no, you have the power over me right now to do anything you want, because you're like this ancient enchanted being and this goddess who's literally lighting your hair and stuff on fire and showcasing your magical powers. And now that I've disrespected you, you're going to try to punish me. So what am I going to do? Get on my knees and start begging for my life. This is absolute nonsense for anyone to take it any other way than what is being clearly presented and clearly shown to you right here. And by the way, again, I'm not going to address the context of about, you know, the worser nature that makes us even worse, because technically speaking, if you look at the evidence of the film, he should be a little boy right now. Okay, so that would make it even worse, because first of all, where are the guards? Okay, there are flaws in this film. Like, where are the guards? Even if he is a fully grown man, where are the guards sitting there answering the door? Okay, the prince would not be doing this. But in context, if you actually look at some of the evidence presented in the film, he's actually technically really supposed to be like a little boy here. I know that's become a more popular idea nowadays, but you know, even when I watched this movie and I actually listened to it when I was younger, I was like, it's kind of weird. Isn't he like a kid? And so it's like, why is he answering the door? And why would you expect him not to turn away an ugly old woman who's just trying to sneak and break a, essentially come into this castle for nothing more than a freaking rose? Stranger danger much? But even if he is an adult, he has every right to turn her away. And you can obviously still argue that his actions are quote unquote basis, like, ugh, this is an ugly bitch, like, get out of my face, like, I don't know you, I don't want an old woman coming there stinking up the joint. And then, you know, she transforms into this powerful magical being who's like, oh, because you called me ugly, I'm gonna your whole family up, okay, I'm gonna mess your whole castle up. And he's like, no, please don't. Okay, he's begging because he's powerless. He's not begging because he just wants to bang her, or, he can't bang her anymore. None of that makes any sense. He's begging because he's powerless to do anything. Again, it's just absolute nonsense. There is no quote unquote simping to be had here. He's not like, oh, because you're so hot, and I can't have you anymore. It's like, no, it's because she's a literal magic. I mean, it'd be different if she wasn't all magical and like just transforms into some hot chick, which, by the way, that alone, the fact she went from an old woman already shows her power over him. There is just no acknowledgement there to be had to say anything different than he is begging because of the power, not because, suddenly she's hot and he can't lust at her and he's a simp or whatever. So that's just ridiculous.
And the princess realized that he was this pathetic coomer, and so she punished him by turning him into a furry, which is like an advanced stage of sexual degeneracy. And the only way that he can break the spell and return to normal is if he falls in love with a woman who also is in love with him within a certain amount of time. And if he can't do that, he's going to stay that way forever. And so he starts throwing these temper tantrums and like gets depressed about it and just stays inside the castle. And I will say it's hard for me not to think that the Beast is subtly based, because he's basically like an autistic incel. But throughout the film, you'll see that this is just a distraction designed to make people like us sympathize with him, think he's a Sigma male or whatever, when in reality, he's just pathetic.
Stop it. Get some help.
John, come on. So this is where I simply defeat this argument by saying, okay, well, let's put John in the same scenario and see how he reacts to the fact that he's now been turned into a monster and his castle has been enchanted to be dark, gloomy, and that he could literally everything has been transformed into this horrible beast. And given the fact that, obviously, again, this is just more evidence of the content of this film that he's a little boy, because a lot of the tantrums, again, this nigga can't even read. Okay, this is something that you would basically learn as a prince, like above even the commoners. Like, this is something that you would basically learn as a prince, and especially during this part in society, that you would have this because of the type of diplomatic missions and stuff that you would be on to do when it comes to running your kingdom. You need to know how to do basic things like mathematics and things of that nature, and learn how to read and write and all that. You would have to know just the bare bones basics of doing that. And clearly this goes to show you this. Again, he's a little kid during this time, but again, even if he's an adult, no one's thinking he's base, and we don't sympathize with the situation because he's quote unquote just a sad, lonely, pathetic beta. No, because he's literally been turned into a vicious monster who was put in an unwinnable scenario. By the way, she's not a princess, she's an enchantress, but I guess, again, watch the movie, whatever, again, to showcase you that he's just objectively wrong about a lot of these things. But nonetheless, it's not just this whole patheticness, and it's like, put you in the same scenario, of course you would become depressed. You've been turned into a vicious rampaging monster and literally forced to try to find love. How are you going to do that? That's kind of like the biggest reason. Even if he's an adult and he understands a lot of these things, it's like, what woman is going to want to fuck a hairy, ugly, disgusting monster like him? She's going to be running away screaming in terror, like, oh my god, please don't eat me. So what are you smoking, John? He's just literally been cursed and then told, and sure, he has 10 years, but his condition doesn't change in 10 years? Nothing about it changed? Of course he would become depressed. Of course he'd become isolated. Who wouldn't? You've just been told you're going to remain a hideous, disgusting monster to live out your natural days in absolute abject misery if you don't get some chick to love you, okay? Get some chick to want you. And again, the context of the time period is very much different. He talks about degeneracy and sexual degeneracy. He talks about furries. That is a modern upbringing, okay? That is not back in the past here, okay? In the time period in which this would have taken place. He'd be seen as nothing but a monster and be hunted down and murdered, which, again, this is the propaganda that Gaston promotes during the film in order to be able to get him murdered. What happened? Do you see any other women out there simping for him? Come on, John, use your fucking eyes, you retard. I'm sorry, I hate to be so mean here, but come on, use your eyes, bro. Where do you see when the Beast is shown other women out there like, oh my god, he's so hot, I would totally want to get to know and fall in love with him? No, they all look at him like he's the vicious monster that he is, and this is why he's depressed, because he knows that. Even if you want to say he's in the context of being an adult when this happens to him, you can understand, but since this is just blatantly more evidence that he's actually a child, which makes this even worse. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to go on the whole child argument, blah 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 blah. But even if he is an adult, you can understand that the enchantress put him in the unwinnable scenario, and this is proven within the film, because here's all the women being shown him, and they don't immediately think, oh, maybe he's just mysterious, maybe can go in there and do something about that. Even Belle herself is like, I'm a prisoner, this sucks, and she sees him and she immediately wants to hide and run away because he's ugly and a vicious monster who would probably eat their children, which is again what Gaston starts explaining to the crowd, because he's a horrible, vicious, monstrous beast. So, John, please, for the love of God, open up your eyes. I don't know how you got this bad of an interpretation from watching this movie when they're blatantly contradicting you by the movie itself.
This is a fantastic example of the difference between the Beast, who we're supposed to believe is the hero, and Gaston, who we're supposed to believe is the villain, because both embody a position of power, but they treat it differently. It's a perfect illustration of what weakness and strength look like when they have power. The Beast acts as a tyrant, whereas Gaston acts as a noble aristocrat. And we see this here when the prince acts selfishly by rejecting the lower class woman from the castle during the storm unless she could satisfy his degenerate sexual desires, whereas a noble aristocrat would feel an obligation towards the lower classes and would help them out. Like Gaston, for example. Gaston is nice to his dysgenic manlet friends. In fact, he's basically his sidekick. But even when the Beast is a prince, he's a tyrant. And then when he's cursed, he still abuses those around him to where they cower in fear when he's present. And again, this is the difference between weakness and strength when they have power.
Yes, but anyways, there's another point that you're actually objectively wrong on. Gaston does not feel that way, especially, okay, just look at the song Gaston. Again, you're right in the sense that they both have authority and power, but the way that they exude that authority and power, he does not show respect or kindness to LeFou or any courteousness. Not only does he literally sentence him to death by literally throwing him into a mountain of snow and telling him to wait for a girl that he's simping after, in the hopes that he hopefully doesn't freeze to death and is able to pick out their thing. He also bullies, beats him up, and essentially humiliates him and makes him the butt of the joke. The only, I mean, especially at the expense, because when LeFou, when he is making fun of Belle's dad, right, and he's actually going against her, Gaston laughs with it. But when it becomes, very non-fruit for him to do that, he immediately turns and beats the doo-doo out of LeFou, by smashing him into the ground. This is just objective. So no, he doesn't care about the quote-unquote lower class or those who are essentially lower than him. And when you say that the prince is a tyrant, we don't actually get shown that in the movie. He turns, him, turning away the old woman is in no way expressed in any idea, in any context of the film, that it's because of sexual desires. Present the clip where he says, because you don't showcase sexual desires for me, or whatever nonsense John is going on about. Therefore, I turn you away because you can't fulfill my sexual desires. He doesn't want to have sex with her. He never expresses the want or need to have sex with her, because that is not what in the scene where Gaston literally wrestles and beats up people, right? He looks at the quote-unquote downtrodden, he looks at somebody who showcases great intelligence and is able to actually beat him in the game, and then he just abuses it by cheating and proclaiming himself as the one to win. He abuses authority. He is an actually abject tyrant. But the prince is understandable. The reason why we can understandable, and it's not necessarily that I'm disagreeing about his tyrannicalness, but that's necessarily I am disagreeing because he actually takes the advice of his servants and the people who are under him. We're actually shown that in the film once again, so I actually am disagreeing, but not entirely all the way. When he is depressed, but like I'm saying, it comes from a place of understanding, because when he is depressed about his situation and stuff like that, and he is angry over the situation, as he obviously would be, because he's been left with an impossible task on the basis of an action that he committed, and everyone is being cursed. It's not even just him, and so now it's like that's heavy on him as a prince, because how is he supposed to help his people? And it's like he already would feel bad because he got them into this predicament due to his actions. Even though, again, that is proven that the Enchantress is a stuck-up cunt, and, obviously, I get why, you would criticize people looking at her as the good guy here, that she taught the Beast a valuable lesson. It's like, no, I don't. And I can understand if you want to criticize that for people who do, because they are painting her in a good light. But I'm just saying, man, John, come on. I'm expecting an actual argument. I'm expecting an actual point, at least one that has some merit and makes sense. But you're just blatantly ignoring the actual film at this point. You're basically denying the film. Gaston, in the power of authority, abuses that power, right? Abuses his wealth and power and privilege over everyone else. Again, with the song Gaston being the biggest pointer to this, where it's just one big suck-off session about how he's better than everyone and how he is rightfully in his right to abuse his authority over everyone because they're just so underdeveloped. They're so underprivileged when it comes in comparison to him, that he's just better than everyone else. Okay, and then he abuses that by showcasing that, He is self-absorbed in that way that he accepts it, that he is the quote-unquote narcissist that you talk about. Not Belle, him. Again, John is just objectively wrong here, and he actually, I don't think he watched the film, or at least if he did, he didn't watch it properly. Okay, I think he just skimmed it. I think every time a scene, because he says this in the beginning that he was just kind of like sleeping his way through it, but every time a scene came with Gaston, oh, that's what wakes him up, and he analyzes, he psychoanalyzes it, with his first year psych student bullshit. Okay, that's what he's doing here. It's insanity.
She has no mother figure present. Her father figure is weak. So basically, the people who were supposed to introduce her to the world, help her understand how it works, what her role is, they've failed to do that. And so she feels displaced. She's singing about how there must be something more than this provincial life. And she sings this after walking through her village, watching the community interact with one another. They're asking about each other's families, watching a mother cradle several beautiful children, etc. And she's on her way to the bookstore because since she has no sense of identity because of the failure of her parents, she has to retreat into books to derive her sense of identity. And she's on her way, and the villagers are singing, that girl's so peculiar. She's not like other girls. Yeah, because she rejects her role in the village. Everybody in the village has a job. They are all unseparated from the products of their labor, but not Belle. No, she feels entitled to more than that. There must be something more. But she doesn't work. She doesn't work towards that. She doesn't work towards that something more. She just lives in fantasy about it. She's a single, young woman with no obvious skill set. Anything that could bring her more, a job, motherhood, marriage to literally the most admired man in the village, she just rolls her eyes at that. She's entitled. She doesn't know what she wants. And the only cure to this is strong male influence, which she has lacked for her entire life, which is why she's like this.
I'm not going to sit here and lie. At this point, it's just baffling. You start to get into this sense where you understand that a person is rambling and just expressing vampant nonsense, and that's where we're at right now. We are at that, and we're not even halfway through this video. This is actually something I actually am going to praise him a little bit for, not the rest of the rambly nonsense, because at this point, if I keep going over it, because a lot of the times he keeps expressing the same ideas, and I've already went over them. I've already proven why they're wrong. I've already expressed why they're not accurate, or it's just a baseless interpretation of the film. But something I will indeed praise him, and hopefully he comes up with some new arguments. Something I will actually praise him for here is he somewhat gets towards the context of the film and about Belle's nature, that she is indeed stuck up. She is indeed stuck up. This is something that is quite obvious, right? And this is something that's objective in her. Now, the movie doesn't actually take the time to present this in a good light, because Belle, towards the end of the movie, does become less stuck up. And it is true to say she has a lot of naivety and indecisiveness, but it's not necessarily coming from a place where she doesn't understand anything. Again, she's never been to the outside world. When she's saying she wants something more than this provincial life, okay, she's not necessarily, it is a part of her stuck-upness, but it's not necessarily saying that she doesn't have any useful value or skills or things of that nature. Clearly, she does, in the sense that her skills aren't not really more fit for a woman, actually, especially when it comes around the idea of engineering. I guess I don't really necessarily know how far she helps her father into it, but it is clear that she does indeed, help, or, is very much appraisant of the idea of his success and things of that nature. There has been education there, and there has been taught, and it's just been more so than anyone else. But, he goes on to talk about the foreshadowing. Again, vampant nonsense, goes about the foreshadowing. Maybe it's Gaston. I can't really say nothing, but I will at least praise him on that.
But anyways, here's where she meets Gaston. He's hunting. He's with his dysgenic manlet friend, his sidekick. And Gaston correctly figures that since he's clearly the best male in town, he deserves Belle because she's the most beautiful girl in town. And Gaston, by the way, is desired by virtually every woman in town, but his eyes are only on Belle. And so he greets her and he takes her book and he asks, "How can you read this? There isn't any pictures." And she says, "Well, some people use their imagination." And this is the essence of Gaston. He values the objective, what he can see, what he knows is true and real. Belle, a narcissist, only values what serves herself. Like, sure, these words are nice, but only because I get to decide what picture they paint. And so Gaston tells her, "Get your head out of those books," which, given the time period in which the story takes place, she was probably reading like revolutionary proto-Marxist literature, and Gaston was trying to save her from that.
No, you absolute moron. They essentially express, and you just expressed yourself. Again, contradiction. Here we go. No, the book she was reading was about fantasy, something clearly more along the lines lines of Prince Charming saves the princess from the castle or whatever, you know, something along the lines of that. There actually is pictures within the book, by the way. So Gaston's just kind of like an idiot. But nonetheless, Belle saying that isn't narcissism. It's her saying that some people use their imagination to read, because that's just an objective fact. That's not narcissism. I honestly don't know what you're snorting in order to come up with that conclusion. This is just kind of like to showcase that Gaston is, you know, kind of a dummy. It's not that he's look at the objective. You see, this is just one of those vampant interpretations that is just kind of like, what? I mean, because to showcase the narcissism that he's actually trying to project on the Belle, you know what Gaston says basically in the next line? Get your head out of the books, Belle, and start focusing on more important things, like me. That is textbook narcissism. That he must become the center of her world, and that he must be the center of everything and the attention that he seeks, because he is very self-absorbed in that way. He is the narcissist. This is just objective fact. If you continue to deny this, that is on you. She snoots her nose about this because she doesn't believe herself to be needed to evolve herself around his world and what he wants. I mean, you want to talk about the sexual degeneracy, you don't even talk about the other women, you know, the Scarlet Whores, you know, who are constantly all around him, who he constantly gets played with all the time. But, you know, because he wants Belle and he starts becoming a beta cuck towards that idea, you know, he starts putting his energy, instead of actually, again, taking the rejection like he should have, he immediately throws a tantrum because, you know, LaFou's like, oh, how did it go? And then he just like throws him into the mud again, you know, talk about somehow he respects his quote unquote inferiors. He doesn't, you know, he gets mad and he's like, I'll have that girl. It's the last thing I do. It's like John didn't clearly watch the movie. Even when I paraphrase, I'm still accurate on exactly Gaston's actions here. So it's just absolute nonsense at this point.
But that being said, 100 years of feminism has vindicated everything that Gaston said. So Belle leaves to go help her father, and LeFou makes some joke about him, and then Belle gets angry. So Gaston berates his dysgenic manlet friend and defends Belle's father, because even though Gaston recognizes that Belle's father is a weak man, he still respects tradition and hierarchy, that her father still has ownership of her.
No, he doesn't. Again, I already expressed and explained this in earlier points, but no, Gaston doesn't. In fact, he is openly making, again, he didn't watch the movie. At this point, that's all I gotta say is he didn't actually watch the movie. I can't even anymore. I honestly don't even want to continue this video. I'm gonna try to stick it out the best way I can, but it doesn't look like anything's really gonna change. And I think I've made my points, but if nothing else changes, then at some point, you guys will know it. I will just end the video right there. Just basically, because that's all I can say. I'm being repetitive with the idea that it's just baseless, because no, he doesn't respect, he doesn't care about her father. And this is, you know, even more so shown in the movie. Talk about, oh, he respects the hierarchy, he respects the authority that he has over Belle. He's like, no, he doesn't, because not only does he make fun until it's convenient for him not to, but then later in the film, he outwardly calls him a kook, and Rice says, you know, her father's always been kooky. Again, watch the song Gaston. Again, this is very much pointing out in the idea that he thinks that thinking and ideas are, you know, just a naturally terrible thing. And, you know, so even if you want to go with that whole argument around the idea of, you know, men being the providers, men always having the solutions, men being the more rational creatures through the idea of thinking and processes, and that women getting ideas is a bad thing, Gaston openly contradicts you by saying that no, just thinking in general is bad. It's not even just specific towards women, and that it's just, quote unquote, as LaFou puts it, a dangerous pastime, which Gaston then proceeds to agree with. No, he berates her father and gets her thrown and gets him thrown in prison, right, for the quote unquote clinical insanity, despite the objective fact that the beast does exist, that the beast is real. And he does nothing to respect his quote unquote hierarchy and respect that, even though he's a quote unquote weak man, according to John, you know, that he still has ownership and stuff over Belle, that he must appease to her father. No, he's happy just to leave him in prison and, you know, even tell Belle, if you're not with us, you're against us, and then just toss her to the side. You know, so much for his quote unquote caring and loving, his protector dynamic, and now he's trying to save her from her quote unquote self. You know, so much for that idea, when he goes to basically prove exactly what I said that he is, and just essentially a glorified narcissist who wants a slave. This is just objective fact at this point, that he just did not watch the film. Okay, that he just did not watch it. And I don't necessarily even want to say I care to disagree with the idea that, you know, the many years, the decades, the century of feminism has not been good for women at all. Okay, I'm very much in agreement with that idea, but it's the way in which he's promoting it here and trying to put it in the context of this film that I disagree with, because it's just absolute nonsense, and he clearly did not watch the film. This is not, I'm a girl, because this was not here. In fact, this was something that was criticized because the 2017 version was the one who emphasized on this whole feminism thing, that I'm a girl, and was actually trying to promote the quote-unquote agenda towards you. This was not in the original context for the film. And this is something that the film, was actually criticized for by, the vast majority of the masses, but, and a lot of people who ended up reviewing this film as well, who weren't already on the political left and, who already want, for feminism, things of that nature, that this was not the same idea that was presented here. And she's not again, I think I already addressed this, but I'm sorry to go back because I'm just trying to find anything of substance here in his argument. She's not reading Feminist Digest or some proto-Marxist book, to kind of like emphasize on her ideas and thinking, and that, this is what she must be reading because, revolutionary ideas means that I don't have to be a mom and stuff like that. No, she is very submissive to the tradition of the base. She's not changing those traditions, and she falls in line to it when it comes to the beast. Again, something there that wasn't there before. Perfect song for explaining this away, that she understands those energies, that she understands, but that there is something more to it. Her whole thing being around, education. Obviously, she would want to be a teacher. I get some of the ideas in here, and I may even agree with them myself, but it's just the context in which you put them in that is just falling apart as an argument. It's ridiculous.
Then her father leaves to go to the fair and literally goes down the wrong path as a result of his pride and his unwillingness to delay gratification by taking a longer path, against the instincts of the horse, which knew it was dangerous, by the way. And then he asks his horse, well, where have you taken us? Because he is literally incapable of accepting personal responsibility, of course symptomatic of his psychopathic personality disorder. So then he gets chased by wolves into the castle. He meets the props and he asks, well, how was this accomplished? Because he is incapable of or unwilling to acknowledge the immaterial, that there's clearly witchcraft at play. He would rather think of it in terms of this like hyper sophisticated invention or very early form of transhumanism or something. So the beast comes down and he's upset to find that he's sitting in his chair. He immediately starts melting down, claiming that the man came to stare at him because he's so insecure about his appearance. And it's this really feminine display overall, because he simultaneously chooses to come downstairs to get involved in this because he wants attention and conflict. His staff had it under control. It wasn't even remotely in the same area of the castle that he was in, but he chooses to make it his problem and then immediately victimizes himself by claiming that the father is tormenting him for his appearance. Again, the beast is weak and deeply insecure.
Okay, I'd like to address several things here, and I'm saying several, but it's going to be like really a couple. Her dad's not a psychopath. I don't need to say any more on that. This psychopathy that he's talking about doesn't exist within here, and he has yet to prove objectively. He just said that he doesn't accept responsibility for when he makes a wrong decision. He blames someone else. It's like, okay, sure, I guess that makes anyone a psychopath, because constantly everyone does it. Everyone has done that once or twice in their life, especially when you're kids. I don't even know why I said once or twice. There are people who've done it many times, and most people, I would even say, done it more than once or twice, where they blame somebody else because they're like, oh man, this is my fault, but I don't want to be stuck with this fuck up, so I'm gonna blame someone else. So that means nothing. And as far as the beast being weak, no, again, and her dad's not a psycho for wondering how it works, okay? God, man, you ever looked at something, despite the fact that John will be the first person to tell you, actually understanding how things work, or at least he should, is a biological response of men. Men, when they are born, tend to, look at the clock, right? Look at the watches on the doctors, right? Look at the tools and the surgical tools and the operations which they use. They don't tend to focus on the more emotional and physical presence of, the person, right? The more social things like the women do. They tend to want to know how things work, curiosity of how it works. Now, he'll be the first one to express this to you, that's the thing, and he has expressed it before, yet here he is contradicting those, and you can say, okay, well, maybe over time he's changed his opinion. Fine, whatever. The point is, that's a scientific fact, and he's now contradicting reality to sit here and say this nonsense that suddenly makes you a psychopath because you're curious how something works. Because if you saw tell me in the audience, if you saw a talking fucking clock, would you not want to know? Would you not be curious? You can't even deny that at this point, because you definitely would be. No one in their right mind would not be curious as to how that contraption worked. It's not about transhumanism or anything like that. Again, he's just inferring things in here that don't actually exist within the film. Okay, none that's here. And as far as the Beast, quote unquote, getting upset and throwing a tantrum, again, giving the state of which he's been in, and sure, you can sit there and try to tell him, oh, well, man up and go out back into the world. You do that as a rampaging monster. You'll go out back into the world and see if everyone doesn't want to murder you. You know, like how they do at the end of the movie, but, you know, just going to ignore that. But whatever. Yeah, no, of course. So does he have a bit of projection? Is he insecure? Obviously. No, you can understand his predicament. And we're not justifying his actions, because nobody thinks that the Beast is being nice in that nature. Nobody thinks that he's good. And, you know, understanding, sure, I baseline agree with you that they had it under control, the situation or whatever. But it's not because the Beast is a quote-unquote self-absorbed, attention-seeking, you know, hog. He mostly stays isolated to himself and doesn't even really greet anyone. For starters, that's already false, because again, it shows you didn't watch the movie. He didn't come down and just inject himself into the situation. He literally sees the guy come into his house. You know, that little shadow, and then you hear the growl. When you see the Beast literally run after seeing him, he was the first person to see him. This is just straight up nonsense. He didn't just suddenly hear the commotions like, oh, I need to be the center of attention. I need to come down. No, he saw somebody breaking into his house. Does he project onto him? Yes. Is he insecure? Yes. But to sit there and try to say that he's quote unquote weak, come on, John. This is just at this point becoming sad.
So now Gaston has saved Belle some time. He's gathered the whole town for their wedding. The guys are all happy. The women are all seething out of jealousy because he's not marrying one of them. And then he goes inside Belle's house to tell her about his ideal future, how they're married, how he's providing her with fresh food to cook, how he gives her 7 sons. He literally says that, like he is so our guy. But he has a plan. There is order to it. So, of course, Belle rejects this because she prefers to deal in disorder, in the chaotic. But instead of saying no, she tells him that she doesn't deserve him, which is another test. And if you've ever courted a young woman, you'll recognize this test. This is her trying to get you to tell her how great she is. But then she publicly humiliates him by throwing him into a mud puddle. Now she's singing again. She fashions this like makeshift headdress for herself while singing "Me, His Little Wife," and then she rips it off, rejecting it, singing again that she just wants so much more than this provincial life.
Oh my God. It's like nauseating trying to listen to this. I mean, no, and no. This isn't some feminist propaganda of her saying, oh, I don't deserve you. It's clearly her using her intelligence, you know, obviously against him. You know, it's not even that complex of a scene. It's just like, oh my God, well, oh, Gaston, oh. You know, she's kind of like manipulating and playing into him. And you can say that that's a tactic of women, but it is a tactic of women. I'm not even trying to argue it as good or bad. In the context of this scene, you know, where you clearly seeing the situation going south, because Gaston is literally not only destroying her furniture here, right? He's just kicking over everything, but he's clearly meant to intimidate and impose upon his impose his presence upon her. I.e., he's trying to literally force her into it. Again, and this is seen when he leaves running away after the quote-unquote humiliation. She didn't throw him out, by the way. She just opened the door and he fell all on his own. So he caused his own humiliation. But, you know, we're going to ignore that because clearly he didn't watch the film. He actually humiliates himself. And what does he do? He says, you know, he's going to get the girl no matter what. You know, if it's basically the last thing he does, you know. In other words, you know, saying that he's about to go and do some devious nature. He was already in the pseudo-rape line. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that because I know how YouTube is. Grape, right? He's already in there, okay? He's already in that position. And this is very much shown in the film. Come on. Her saying, you know, I don't want to be his little wife. Again, I pretty much already addressed this in earlier stuff, you know, about the whole provincial life and all that. But as far as like the whole quote unquote little wife line is, again, doesn't want to be a slave. He's trying to force himself upon her injection. This is not order. This is slavery. And I mean, you think John would understand that order left unchecked leads to tyranny. Oh my God. If you really want to put Gaston in the context of order and structure, well, look at that. He very much proves that the idea of unchecked authority leads into tyranny because he's a fucking tyrant. Thank you, John, for playing. You are awarded no points. Everything you said has made everyone else illogically dumber, especially if they listen to this. And we actually look at the ratio. Now, to be fair, I know that YouTube doesn't allow you to see the dislikes anymore. They only the likes. I have no idea what the ratio is on this, and I can't see it. Only he would know, but I just had to look at at the genuine context of the comments here, and it seems that every one of these retards down in the comment section are just absolutely retarded. They're functionally like, oh my god, he makes so much sense. I completely agree. And for me, it's hilarious. I never thought, I would see some things from somebody like John, right? Because there are things I have agree with, there's things I have disagree with him on, but there's things I have agree with on. Because like I said, I have watched his content before in the past, and I was like, okay, this guy, seemingly enough has a good head on his shoulders, but man, oh man, I guess because I haven't, watched him consistently, in the sense I haven't seen the change of going from where he used to be when I actually did, watch, a couple of his videos. Not every time one came out, but if it's something I found an interest in the topic or whatever, I checked out his opinion on it.
Because she's literally rejecting her nature as a woman. She perpetually wants more, yet she doesn't know what will make her happy. She's always wanting more, but she doesn't know how to define that. So she runs into this field talking about how she wants adventure, which is symbolic of not wanting to be tied down or whatever. And again, jokes aside, this is the message of the film, and it backfires spectacularly, as we'll explain later on. But it's like, think about that. I want more. I want more. She runs away from this organized wedding. She didn't have to lift a finger. The greatest man in the village, and probably the entire country of France at this point, frankly. And she runs away from that in pursuit of more and ends up in an empty field. Like, this is very emblematic of the utter state of the Western woman. It's like, I reject the natural order of things. I want more. You're in a field. You're empty, literally in terms of geography and your internalized spirit. You stupid one.
It's mind-boggling, okay, people? It is mind-boggling what you're seeing here right now. I mean, because seriously, she's rejecting her womanhood. Again, so many of these points I've already addressed, so I don't really need to go back over them. You guys can just watch the video and see that I've addressed and I went back over them. This is just baffling. Okay, I don't even know. We're gonna keep continuing on, and like I said, I am gonna watch the entirety of the video, and hopefully, but I'm giving him like one more chance to actually come up with some good, decent arguments. So you guys are be, looking at the video. And I want you to know that this is still under the interjection of fair use and stuff like that. But you guys will be looking at most of the video, and I'll skip around here and there, especially when it comes into more of the nonsense. But again, the video will be linked in the description below if you feel like I've taken out anything or said, there was no context or something. But I am just trying to specifically address the arguments, because again, this is more of a reaction, but also kind of like in the same vein. Like I said, we're doing it differently. Like I said at the beginning, we're doing it the debunk differently this time, where it is in more of a vein of a reaction. I don't want the copyright gods to come at me, because this is still fair use, but at the same point, you know what I'm saying.
So now she's on her knees in front of him, looking up at him like, please, there must be something I can do, anything. And to the Beast's credit here, he just totally rejects her advances, because he just goes, no, he's my prisoner. And again, it's hard to write off the Beast, because he really is subtly based in that he's basically an autistic incel. But anyways, Belle offers to take the place of her father, and the Beast agrees if she promises to stay there forever. And at this point, her father, who, he's not a strong figure in her life, but even he's like, Belle, what are you doing? Don't do this. And it just goes to show how women will literally destroy their own lives just to spite standards that they think are oppressive. Like, this girl literally rejected her town and everything that it had to offer. She rejects Gaston, who is literally the ideal male, all because she needs something more. She can't be held down. And then in less than 90 seconds, she agrees to spend the rest of her life in a castle with a monster. And you can say, oh, she did it to save her father. But it's like, first of all, this is 1700s, 1800s France, and that guy is old and fat. He's sick now. He's got like maybe 2 years left. Secondly, she's actually contesting her father by disobeying his authority over her, and doing so by masquerading it with the typically masculine virtue of sacrifice. She's literally LARPing one of those books that she never should have been reading in the first place, frankly, and this is what happens to her. So she has no true concept of feminine identity because she doesn't have a mother figure. She rejects everything that she's called to do by her community because she regards it to be binding, and so the only sense of identity that she can find in her real life is inspired by that into which she retreated, which are those books.
For the love of all that is holy and sacred, this has just become we are watching the slow descent of a man into madness. This is what happens. You ever heard that idea that stop super analyzing children's stories and films? I never want to agree with that idea, that you can't, because everyone has their opinions and it doesn't really matter what the medium is. You can analyze it however you want. He is the reason why they say that, because I've never seen someone who would look at the idea of a noble sacrifice and then be all like, oh, because that's what men typically do. you know. And I must super analyze it as her part of her rejection because she didn't want to be here, and then she ended up here because of her state of mind, her state of being. It's like, no, I know it sounds like I'm making fun of it, and I'm not really trying to. Okay, I'm not really trying to come up here like I'm just saying blah 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 as if I didn't hear or listen to what he said. The problem is I did hear and listen to what he said, and that's why, you know, it's just blase because it's just noise. It's vamping noise. He's just making this up as he goes. No, a noble sacrifice is not meant to be predicated to a man or a woman. Do men do it more? Yes, but that is a biological response that men have towards the idea of being the protector, being the provider. They are more willing to put themselves in that scenario. And it's not, Belle does disagree because of her care for her father. In fact, she acts very womanly, so it actually disagrees because instead of acting rationally and understanding, she acts like a woman. She is very emotional and blatant about this idea. So it's like, John, do you not see how stupid you look when you keep saying she's rejecting femininity, she's rejecting all this, when she's not? Because she's being very irrational on this. Okay, obviously, it'd be more prudent for her father to remain as a prisoner. But because she immediately takes her emotional response and she loves her dad, and she is, you know, being a woman, like no matter how good a woman is raised, this is how women tend to act. This is where they are. Why? Because it's biologically innated into them to act this way, to be overly emotional, right? To have a more emotional. If she had more masculine energy, or was quote unquote rejecting femininity and trying to be more masculine, you know, trying to, you know, go with that pro-feminist idea that I don't need no man and women can do it all, then she wouldn't. She'd be more in line with the idea that, well, you know, dad's lived. But again, it doesn't matter anyway. You know, that dad's lived his life, whatever, you know, leave him die. No, or, you know, go back and get some help and maybe come back, you know, with stronger people, you know, like the men come back and, you know, save her dad or whatever, you know. No, okay, it doesn't matter anyway because it's up to the beast. The beast was not going to let Belle go because the beast sees an opportunity. He sees the opportunity to get out of his situation. And what is that situation that he's been placed in? Under the enchantress. It's like, oh my God, here's a woman. Maybe I can force her into it. You know, maybe I could pull a Gaston here, you know, and try to force my authority in and will over her to the sense to where I can convince her or subjugate her to the idea of being with me and it'll help me. See, the problem is, and why they don't direct the movie towards that idea, is because it's about love. It's a supernatural element, okay? The logistics go out of the window because not only does he have to love her, yes, he does see an opportunity because at this point he's been living with this 10 years. And so he's not thinking all the way rationally in that sense. But, you know, after 10 years, you know, he's like, oh, finally someone. So it was always up to him. But the idea is that there's love. It has to be love between both of them in order to stop his curse. But he sees an opportunity. He starts to grow and change accordingly, especially when his servants, you know, kick in, you know, and they're all like, and unlike Gaston, who would just ignore the ideas, you know, smack them away or make it look like, you know, oh, it was all his idea, like Gaston does and would, he's like actually accepting of it. He's like, maybe you're right. He's like, well, treat her as a guest, sir. Don't make her a prisoner. She's not a prisoner. She's our guest. She's our guest. And he's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you guys are right. Maybe if I want to, you know, start getting her connection here and, you know, understanding this way of life and being with me and blah, 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 maybe I have to start, you know, actually doing some things to approach that situation. It was never going to be decided on, quote unquote, Belle, okay? It was never decided on. It was always up to the beast. So it's completely irrelevant, any nonsense that you're talking towards the idea that is, quote unquote, her defying the masculine energies and her dad and, you know, just not respecting authority because she doesn't have a woman in her life to teach her where her proper place is under the man's boot heel. It's none of that because the beast is the ultimate decider here. Does he reject it at first? Yes, but that's clearly an obvious ploy to get her to project herself more. And then immediately once she's like submitted, done. Maurice is out of there. This was going to happen anyway. The beast is actually kind of smart in to play this way. Where now it looks like, you know, more so along the lines of entirely on Belle's decision. And it is. There's nothing wrong with the noble sacrifice going to a woman, right? Daughter, mother, wife, doesn't matter. Okay, that's not promoting feminism and all that nonsense. It's just what somebody would do. Now, again, there are ways to go about it and how men and women would, and which options they would take in order to go about it, but it's still the same result. So yet, once again, he's speaking nonsense.
Now we're at the lodge, all the guys are there, and Gaston's feeling a little bit down after the whole Belle situation earlier, and so the fellas cheer him up by singing a song about how much of a chat he is. Like, they literally have a song dedicated to how epic he is. All the men want to be him, all the women want him, and it's like, if he's the villain, why am I rooting for him? If he's the villain, why is everyone rooting for him? He's drinking with the boys, he's wrestling with the boys, he's singing with the boys, he's playing chess with the boys, he's spitting with the boys, he's shooting with the boys, he flips over the chessboard as a rejection of the abstract in favor of natural law. He's hoisting people up with one arm. He's wrestling all the guys in town at once. He's talking about how he ate 4 dozen eggs as a boy and now 5 dozen eggs a day as a man, which is why he's roughly the size of a barge. I mean, this guy is it. He's loved by his community. He rejects books and sources because those are how weak people justify their beliefs since they're incapable of original thought. He takes care of his dysgenic manlet friend. He's dancing with him. Like, this guy's fantastic. I'd be on his team every day of the week and twice on Sunday. How are we supposed to believe that this guy is the villain?
All right, I gotta leave, okay?
John, we just started. Come on, man.
Listen, there's a lot to see in this life. Not wasting it here.
Again, you guys can take at what you're saying, about the suck off. Again, I just think at this point, and I'm being a little bit facetious here myself, I think he may be a little bit gay for Gaston, which, fine, fair enough. Do what you gotta do, bro. Don't let me stop you in your investments. But nonetheless, he's the villain, because once again, this is the only thing I'm going to really address here, because it's the only thing even remotely worth addressing at this point. Because if you want to take it seriously, he does do villainous shit. Like, at this point, it's just objective. If you guys have watched the movie, I believe I've already explained it about the stuff he can do. It's about the stuff he does, breaking and entering, trespassing, murder facilitation of murder. Come on, start being real here. And literally, bribery, bribery of a government official, literally condemning his friends, his quote-unquote friends, to death. Need I go on? Literally getting a girl's father thrown into a mental insane asylum because he wants to help his daughter from a rampaging beast, according to him, based on his interactions. So, they're pretty super based. I'm just saying, Gaston is a villain because he does do objectively bad shit. Like, I don't know how you don't understand that. Obviously, he didn't watch the movie. It's just it. That's all I can keep saying. He didn't watch the movie.
Then he gives her a whole library, like the biggest library you've ever seen. And that should tell you all you need to know right there. Like, literally, the Chad don't read books versus the Virgin. Here, take all of them. And then we get into this really weird montage of the beast, like, learning to behave or whatever. And what's important to note here is that Belle's validation and purpose comes only from control and power. She needed to artificially and socially engineer the beast into something he isn't to feel validated and powerful. Gaston wasn't enough for her because he was already perfect. And she rejected the feminine attitude shared by virtually every woman in the village, which was that their validation was to come from being the wife of the best man. But since that implied a position of submissiveness to the man, it did not satisfy the revolutionary ego of Belle, who by this point is a sexual Marxist. And she even brags about this in a song, how she's able to change the beast into a perversion of itself. And you might say, but he's a person underneath. Yeah, but she doesn't know that, remember? She's literally trying to normalize bestiality to herself. White women and bestiality. Talk about a tale as old as time. I will not elaborate on this. However, just know that there is no greater indication that a white woman has given up on having a family than her adopting a male dog in her late 20s, early 30s. Like, we all know a few of those.
Okay, so the next points he really gets into is, again, going on this tangent and diatribe of absolute, again, nonsense. The beast is trying to learn how to behave, right? So in other words, he's being trained like he's an animal, blah blah blah. Gaston is just this perfect creature, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. And Belle's just loving the unnatural. She's loving the chaos and blah blah blah. Again, the whole point of the story is that what lies underneath the rough exterior, the monster, the beast, the blah blah blah. Okay, they don't even have to use the context of beast. What lies on that rough exterior? There is a person. There's a person there. Something there that wasn't there before is the greatest acknowledgement of this. And it's not some quote unquote her trying to give into sexual deviancies. Again, he didn't actually listen to the song, which fine. Fair enough. I get it. Not everyone's into musicals. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly natural not to be into a musical. But no, again, that is the expression. The song itself is the expression that basically he is like Gaston. Again, I know he keeps calling him an autistic incel and blah blah blah. He's not bass. He's not chatty. Whatever. I don't really care. That's kind of irrelevant. It's not really an argument. Sure, if that's your opinion, fine. It's a wrong opinion, but you know, if it's your opinion, fine. Whatever. Go ahead, be about that life. Nonetheless, it's basically showcasing that him and Gaston are very similar in that nature, right? Especially when it comes to their possession of having power and authority over others and how they choose to exercise that power. But whereas the Beast is kind of showcasing that there's somebody underneath all that gruffness and underneath all that quote unquote Chad or Sigma energy, as you would try to quote unquote purpose, there is, you know, a person there. And it's not really necessarily me trying to say that that's, you know, going against, you know, Chads or Sigmas or whatever like that, and you know, like they don't have emotions, you know, men don't have emotions. It's none of that. It's basically saying, you know, going off of what he's saying, that, you know, Gaston is this big epic Chad, you know. So I'm just trying to use it in context in the way that he's playing it, even though I disagree with his context of terms. But nonetheless, basically saying that, you know, oh, this underneath all that Chad energy is a person. So in other words, underneath, you know, this rough and gruff exterior, there is an actual human being there. The personality is not necessarily what's going to change here. And the fact of the reason why we sympathize with the Beast in a particular way, and not in that context of that scene, I don't know where he's getting that from. Nobody thinks that the Beast is, you know, just this perfect creature. Okay, him and Belle actually go back and forth and they talk about their faults in this scene. And they both understand, they come to the conclusion that in one or so ways they're both wrong. The Beast begins to change because he's realized he's been a dick. That he's basically been Gaston, but without the filter, you know? I mean, not that Gaston has a filter, but I'm saying, you know, without the context, without the lens of, you know, that, wait, I'm a person, okay? Why am I acting like this? Okay, why am I sitting here, you know, just basically being just this gigantic a-hole? But to be fair, unlike with Gaston, the Beast has actually gone through something traumatic that is forcing him in a nearly unwinnable scenario, for which there's almost no hope in saving him from said scenario. And now here he is, recognizing that here's his only option, and he's pushing it away. Okay, or what may be his only option, and he's pushing it away. And so he begins to acclimate and say, under here, there was once, you know, a man, or, you know, in logical case, a young boy, but you know, there is a man, right? There is somebody who can exude the same type of personalities, right? The same type of quote unquote Chad or Sigma energy, but at the same time, he's not a penis, right? He's not a dick. He's just an asshole who expresses those in toxic ways. That is what's going on there, okay? That he doesn't have to be quote unquote a slave driver, okay? Or demean Belle in any way to get his way or to get what he wants. The idea is that them coming to an understanding and finding love within each other and how they choose to express that. Well, and they expressed it in very common ways that both men and women tend to express their love and stuff for each other. But given his situation and context, you can understand why he is maybe insecure and depressed. Again, who really wouldn't be? Especially when you saw No Way Out for like 10 years. Because again, he's been stuck that way for 10 years. So once again, John has nothing. There is no point here to be had. It is just, again, more nonsense.
She's rejected her home and her spot at the top of the feminine hierarchy in favor of the complete inversion of everything that she formerly knew, because Belle at her core possesses that revolutionary chaotic spirit, which is the consequence of unchecked feminine energy, not guided by a mother, not checked by her father, and influenced by proto-Marxist literature, and now she can only find purpose through chaos. And this is why the tale as old as time is in reference to the true plot of the film. Think about it. As old as time. What is that in reference to? Genesis in the Garden of Eden, where we see what happens when unchecked feminine nature is allowed to manifest. And this is dog whistling to the audience that they have to read between the lines and see that the true story is about the chaos and the order of the female condition, and whether it will be the weak man or the strong man to channel her energy in destructive or productive ways, respectively.
I have crippling depression.
And I'm sorry, but this is pretty much it, guys, for me. Maybe once we get to the latter part of the section here, where I just kind of like go, because like I said, this is a bit more of a reaction, so I will kind of like add in a bit of a review section to like kind of like showcase to you guys if he did say something that was worth talking about. But at this point, I'm just continuing the entirety of the video, but there's nothing more worth talking about, and I guess we'll see you guys in that review portion. All right, so that was I can't believe I was about to say, so that was the end right there, guys. No, this is it was baffling to say the least. Now he does go on to continue, and no, he doesn't correct any of his wrong points. In fact, he continues to double, triple, quadruple down. He just goes down, 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 like he's been going down on Gaston this entire video. Point is, it's just more nonsense. Okay, I, I found myself laughing and snickering at some of the points because the whole time I was thinking he kept calling Beast an autistic incel. I'm just saying, what happens when people project. Anyway, so yeah, it's just basically him saying that again, the Beast is even though the Beast is not even insecure anymore at that point, and in fact he doesn't just let her go because of any type of insecurity. No, he lets her go because he loves her, and it's a common trope, and you can say whatever you will about the trope, but the idea is that when you love something, let it go, blah blah blah. That's the nonsense they want to prove. He tries to justify the propaganda, he tries to justify all of Gaston's actions, and even though he's talking about, yes, noble aristocrat, and that's the part I laughed. That's one of the parts I laughed at because he said noble aristocrat. Oh, so you mean they go around stealing everything that isn't yours? Isn't that just the leftist propaganda, talking right back at you? Yes, because that's what they believe, that the quote-unquote noble aristocrats, often spoke about in their quote-unquote European or white, their white hatred, their white racism, towards the idea that they just went around stealing everything that wasn't theirs, and they just felt like because they were so rich and perfect and privileged, they could do whatever they want to the downtrodden. It's basically, he's speaking like a leftist. That's what he's doing. And again, he's one of those people who has put himself in a position where he says he stands against that. He stands against the SJW, stands against the feminist, nonsense. But here he is, basically singing and praising in one of their talking points. Because if he thinks that what Gaston does is a part of the noble aristocrat identity, then he's, retarded. That is just basically the end right there. He basically criticized and says that it was a humiliation of Gaston, that he was a noble hero, that when he was autistically screeching at the Beast, saying that Belle is mine, once again proving the actual objective fact of who Gaston really is and what this whole thing was about and his sympatry. And, the fact is, at some points, I could see where John is coming from. In the sense that, like I already said, the Beast and Gaston, both of them, become beta simps and basically do go around trying to kill each other, essentially over women. But that's more so invited by Gaston than the Beast. Alright, so he's actually wrong about Beast's position in there when he's just, looking to be dead. Or wanting to be dead because of his depression. No, it's not Belle. Okay, in a way it is Belle, but at the same time it's mostly due to the fact that he now recognizes that he's going to be a monster forever because of what he had to do. Right, he's under no belief or obligation to the idea that Belle's going to come back, and that she did really love him. And then once that she did showcase that she actually really did care, she really does love him, and that she was coming back, for him, now he's reinvigorated, because he wasn't under that before. Again, with the whole idea of, I release you as my prisoner. See, he was still in the wrong mindset, even though that hadn't actually been the case. It was very well established that she was a guest, and that they had come to an understanding and had fallen in love with each other. They had actually fallen in love with each other. But again, because he is still, insecure. Again, by that moment in time, and by the previous moments after, he's not really insecure. But because he still has a little bit of insecurity, he's not entirely insecure. But because he has some insecurities, left about him, he kind of feels the way he does on that. And again, it's meant to really push the trope of, if you love something, sometimes you gotta let it go. Blah, blah, blah. Think whatever you want about that you will. But that's kind of the idea being pushed forward there. With that being said, you didn't have the difference between him and Gaston on that. As in, Gaston's really the one promoting and pushing the idea of, I gotta kill you for the girl because I'm a beta, I'm a simp. I gotta go out there for the girl, do everything for the girl. Oh, the girl is mine, the girl's mine. It's not metaphorical at all. It's very objective into what he's trying to push for there. But the Beast is like, I'm better off dead. Okay, my curse is just going to last anyway. I'm going to be a monster. Okay, so it doesn't actually matter. Can you say, and like I said, there's some points where John can make an actual solid point. Can you say that this was terrible leadership on, the idea of him not actually stepping up to protect his castle? Because, he realizing that it actually doesn't matter, defending their lives is pointless because they're all going to be enchanted objects for the rest of their lives. So, what's the point? Because that is where he's under the assumption. And then this is kind of like proven, at least in his mind at first, because what happens? A military force comes. So it's like, Belle ran off, she told the whole town, and then boom shakalaka, here comes the Beast getting killed. So maybe he was right. That maybe the love wasn't reciprocated. And it's like, blah. There you go, leave, Belle, leave, blah. Because I loved her, so I gotta let her go. Even if she may betray me, right? He was gonna be stuck like that anyway, as far as he's concerned. And so that's where you get that dynamic from. It's none of what John is saying. Everything he's saying is absolute bollocks. It's nonsense, okay? It's absolute nonsense. He read way too much into this, and he read into things that just aren't there, and that the film constantly contradicts him on. He's just choosing to blatantly ignore it, okay, for his own narrative, and trying to interpret actions that clearly aren't meant to be metaphorical into metaphorical ones so he can justify his dick writing, okay? So that's pretty much it, guys. See you in the next one. Peace.